Dear viewers of the channel Stories by Peter Hub, this is the 20th anniversary issue. The channel is very fresh in this regard. Before I begin telling the story, write in the comments, where are you watching from? I will be very interested to see from what point of the planet you are watching this video. Well, I will begin the story.
The lines of code on Max's screen were a symphony, a complex and beautiful melody that only he could truly appreciate. For 2 years, he had lived in this world of his own creation, a tiny studio apartment in the heart of the city, its walls lined with takeout containers and empty coffee cups. His world was not one of people, but of logic, of elegant algorithms and clean, efficient functions. He was a ghost in the machine, a digital architect building a new reality. The reality he was building was called Nexus, a revolutionary social app designed to connect people based on their deepest, most authentic passions rather than shallow interests. It was a digital garden, a place for genuine connection, a stark contrast to the sprawling, noisy social networks he disdained. He had poured every ounce of his intellect, every waking moment, every dollar he had into this project. Nexus was his magnum opus, a piece of his soul translated into code. He had shared the initial prototype with only 2 people, his best friends Liam and Chloe. Liam was the charismatic one, the smooth talker who could sell ice to an Eskimo. Chloe was the brilliant strategist, the one who saw the chessboard in every business deal. They had been his anchors, his connection to the real world, the 2 people he trusted implicitly. They were a trio, a team, a promise of a future they would build together. When he showed them the app, their reaction was everything he had hoped for. Liam's eyes lit up, his usual laid-back demeanor replaced by a burning, almost feverish energy. "Max, this is it," he'd said, his voice a low, excited rumble. "This isn't just an app. This is a movement." Chloe, ever the pragmatist, had simply nodded, a slow, thoughtful smile on her face. "The market for this is untapped," she had noted, her voice calm but with a razor's edge of excitement. "This is a unicorn."
They proposed a partnership, a company. Liam would handle the public face, the pitches, the marketing. Chloe would manage the finances, the legalities, the business strategy. And Max, the genius, the architect, would be free to do what he did best, build. It was a perfect arrangement, a symphony of talent. Max, blinded by the trust and the promise of a shared dream, agreed without hesitation. He signed the paperwork, trusting their legal counsel completely. The company was born, and for Max, it felt like the beginning of a new life. The first few months were a whirlwind of late nights and early mornings, a blur of coffee and code, but it was a blur filled with purpose. Nexus was no longer just his project, it was their project, a shared future. He was building something with the 2 people he loved and trusted most in the world. He was building a legacy. The rapid ascent of their company, now officially named Nexus Tech, was breathtaking. The app went from a simple prototype to a viral sensation. Funding rounds came and went with dizzying speed. Max, buried deep in the technical architecture, was mostly insulated from the business side of things. He knew they were successful, but he didn't grasp the scale of it. He trusted Liam and Chloe to manage the financial side, just as he trusted them with everything else. Then came the meeting, a solemn, unexpected gathering in their pristine corporate office. The room was sterile, devoid of the vibrant energy of their early days. Liam's face was grim, his usual smile replaced by a worried frown. Chloe's expression was unreadable, her gaze distant and cold. "Max, we have to talk," Liam began, his voice low and serious. "The next funding round, it fell through. The market is unstable, and investors are spooked." Max's heart sunk. "What do you mean? The app is doing so well." Chloe leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. The user base is growing, yes, but we're burning through cash. Our burn rate is astronomical. We're on the verge of bankruptcy.
They presented him with a meticulously prepared spreadsheet, a labyrinth of red numbers and projected losses. The data was convincing, filled with technical jargon about market volatility, overvaluation, and the investor confidence crisis. Max, a genius with code but a novice with finance, felt a profound sense of helplessness. The one part of the business he didn't understand was the part that was failing. "We have an option," Chloe said, her voice soft and sympathetic. "Liam and I have been approached by a group of investors who are willing to buy a majority stake. It's a lifeline. It will save the company." "But what about us?" Max asked, his voice filled with a desperate hope. "We can't ask them to save us without offering something significant," Liam said, his voice tinged with a feigned sadness. "They're willing to buy our shares, all of them, but we have to give up a controlling interest to make the deal work. It's the only way to save the company, Max." Max felt a knot in his stomach. The thought of giving up his baby, his masterpiece, was unbearable. But the alternative, watching it fail, watching his friends lose everything, was even worse. "What will happen to my shares?" "We'll buy you out," Chloe said, her voice filled with a professional, almost mechanical sincerity. "We'll give you a generous severance package, a fair price for your shares. You'll be able to walk away with a clean slate, no debt, and a good amount of money. It's the smart play, Max. It's the only way to ensure the app lives on." Max, blinded by his loyalty and his belief in their friendship, agreed. He signed the papers, selling his majority stake in the company he had built from scratch. He walked away with a check for a few $100,000, a sum that felt huge at the time, but which would turn out to be nothing more than a cruel joke. He had trusted his friends to save his creation. He had trusted them to be honest. He had trusted them to be his partners. He had trusted them, and in doing so, he had sealed his own fate.
Max's initial shock was quickly replaced by a profound sense of relief. The weight of financial responsibility, of late-night anxieties about burned rates and investor confidence was gone. He had done the right thing. He had saved his app, his creation. The few $100,000 from the buyout felt like a king's ransom, a ticket to a new, debt-free life. He took a much-needed vacation, a few weeks of aimless travel to clear his mind, to recover from the years of relentless coding. He felt a sense of freedom he hadn't known since he first started building Nexus. He believed he was a good person, a true friend who had put his company's survival above his own ambition. But the real world, the one he had so long ignored, was about to teach him a brutal lesson. He was sitting in a small cafe, scrolling aimlessly on his phone, when he saw the headline. A large, bold banner on a major tech news site screamed, "Nexus Tech acquired by global conglomerate for $5 billion. Max's world tilted on its axis. He read the article, his hands trembling. It detailed the meteoric rise of Nexus Tech, its innovative business model, and the shrewd leadership of its co-founders, Liam and Chloe. The article praised their visionary strategy in navigating a market crisis to secure a massive buyout. There was no mention of Max, no mention of the investor crisis, no mention of the looming bankruptcy. It had all been a lie. He tried to call them, but his calls went straight to voicemail. He drove to their corporate office, a gleaming glass tower he had only ever seen from the street, and was met by a stone-faced security guard who told him he was no longer on the access list. He sent frantic emails, text messages, but received no response.
Finally, after a week of silence, Liam sent a brief, cold email. "Max, you are a great talent, but our visions diverged. It was a business decision. We wish you the best." Max's vision blurred. The generous severance package was a pittance. The fair price for his shares was a cruel joke. They hadn't saved the company, they had stolen it. They had lied to him, manipulated his trust, and left him with nothing but a worthless check. He was not a hero. He was a fool. A pawn in a game he hadn't even known he was playing. The people he had trusted with his life, with his creation, with his future, had betrayed him in the most calculated and devastating way imaginable.
The months that followed were a blur of despair and cold, gnawing emptiness. Max lost his studio apartment. He sold his car. He was a ghost in the city he had once hoped to conquer, a shadow of the man who had dreamed of building a new reality. He spent his days in public libraries, his nights in cheap, transient hostels, a man with no home, no friends, and no purpose. The initial devastation gave way to a cold, hard rage. It wasn't the kind of rage that screamed or shattered things. It was a silent, simmering fury, a fire in his belly that fueled a single, all-consuming thought: revenge. He knew he couldn't fight them on their terms. He had no money, no connections, no legal recourse. Liam and Chloe were untouchable, shielded by layers of corporate lawyers and unimaginable wealth. He had to fight them in a world where those things didn't matter. He had to fight them in his world, the digital world. Max began his work in the shadows. He found an old, abandoned server room in a forgotten office building, a dusty, rat-infested cavern that smelled of mold and neglect. It was his new home, his fortress of solitude. He lived on cheap coffee and canned food, his days and nights blending into a single, relentless mission. He was no longer building to connect. He was building to destroy.
His new project was a weapon, a ghost in the machine designed to haunt and dismantle his former friend's empire. He called it Aether, a completely decentralized, untraceable cryptocurrency network built on a quantum-proof blockchain. The project's true purpose, however, was not currency. It was information. Hidden within Aether's immutable ledger was a backdoor, a protocol that would allow him to embed and retrieve data, a secret library of information that no one could ever access, track, or destroy. He began to build the network of informants, using their own app, Nexus, to find and connect with people who had been wronged by Nexus Tech's unethical business practices. He was no longer a creator. He was a puppeteer, pulling the strings from the shadows, slowly building his arsenal. He was going to expose every lie, every deception, every dirty secret. He was going to make them pay for every ounce of his pain, for every night he had spent in despair. He was no longer building a legacy. He was building a grave. The stench of stale air and forgotten history was Max's constant companion in the server room. The hum of old machines was his new soundtrack. He was no longer a man. He was a machine himself, fueled by a single-minded pursuit. His new home was a ghost, a forgotten relic of the city's past. But it was a place where he could finally be himself. A man invisible to the world. A man who was about to make his presence known in a way no one would ever see coming.
His first step was to build his army. He used the one tool they had left him, the Nexus app. He knew its source code, its vulnerabilities, its backdoors. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was looking for fellow ghosts. He created a series of anonymous, coded messages embedded within innocuous-looking forums on the app. He used the very system his friends had stolen from him to find others who had been betrayed by them. He looked for the bitter and the broken, the people who had been sold a dream and were left with nothing. He found them, a talented graphic designer who had been promised a share of the company's profits but was cut out of the deal, a young brilliant marketing analyst whose work was stolen and credited to a senior executive, a group of investors who had been given false information that led to their financial ruin. They were all there, a network of silent victims, a digital legion of the damned. He communicated with them through encrypted messages, never revealing his identity, never giving them a reason to trust him, only a reason to hate Liam and Chloe as much as he did. He began to gather information. He asked them for documents, for screenshots of emails, for old contracts and forgotten legal documents. He used Aether, his new blockchain, as a vault, a hidden library where every piece of incriminating evidence was stored, encrypted, and made completely untraceable. He had no intention of using this information to sue them. Lawsuits were for people with money. His weapon was far more subtle, far more devastating. His weapon was chaos.
His first move was a test. He chose a small but significant piece of information, a few leaked emails between Liam and a journalist showing how Liam had paid for a positive review of Nexus Tech in a prominent magazine. The information itself was not illegal, but it was damaging. It was a crack in the public's perception of Liam as a visionary and a leader. Max anonymously leaked the emails to a small, independent tech blog known for its scathing and uncompromising journalism. The article was a sensation. It didn't bring Nexus Tech down, but it created a ripple of doubt. Liam was forced to make a public statement, feigning outrage at the baseless accusations. But the damage was done. The first crack in the facade had been made. Max sat in his dusty chair, watching the news unfold. He felt a cold, hard satisfaction. The ghost he had built was working. He was no longer powerless. He was an architect of chaos, a puppet master pulling strings from the shadows. He was a man with nothing to lose and a world to gain.
The first leak was a whisper. The second was a scream. Max began to escalate his attacks, leaking a steady stream of information. Each piece of data was carefully chosen, a strategic blow to a specific part of their empire. He leaked financial spreadsheets that showed the company was in debt for a significant amount of money. He leaked emails revealing that Chloe and Liam had a secret partnership with a company that produced harmful data mining software. The media, sensing a huge story, went into a frenzy. The whispers turned into headlines. Nexus Tech's visionary leaders accused of fraud, the dark side of the tech world. The public, once so enchanted with the app, began to turn on them. The facade of the perfect company began to crumble. Liam and Chloe, once a united front, were now at each other's throats. Their sleek corporate office became a battlefield. "This is your fault, Liam!" Chloe would scream, her face flushed with fury. "Your public persona, your big mouth, you're the one who got us into this mess." "My public persona is what got us a $5 billion deal," Liam would counter, his voice a low, furious rumble. "You're the one who was supposed to protect the company. You're the one who was supposed to be the brilliant strategist." Their arguments were public, witnessed by their employees and even their investors. The company was in a state of chaos. The once impenetrable partnership began to fracture, the cracks widening with every new leak. They hired a team of cybersecurity experts to find the source of the leaks, but Max was a ghost. They couldn't find him. They couldn't find his network. They couldn't find Aether. It was as if the leaks were coming from a void, a place that didn't exist. They were fighting a war they couldn't win, a war against an invisible enemy. Max watched from his server room, his heart a cold, hard stone in his chest. He was no longer a victim. He was a phantom, haunting the lives of the people who had wronged him. He had no regrets. He had lost everything, but in doing so, he had gained something far more valuable,
a profound understanding of the world and a tool to shape it. He had a weapon, and he was ready to use it. The air in the server room grew colder, but Max didn't notice. His focus was absolute, a singular point of light in a universe of darkness. The unraveling of Nexus tech was nearing its end. Chloe and Liam were cornered, their carefully constructed empire crumbling around them. Their public image was in tatters, their investors were pulling out, and their legal team was in a state of panic, trying to trace the untraceable leaks. The ghost had them exactly where he wanted them. He knew their last move, their last, desperate, pathetic gambit. They were going to blame each other. Liam would accuse Chloe of mishandling funds and making secret deals. Chloe would accuse Liam of gross negligence and corporate malpractice. They would throw each other under the bus, a final, shameful act of self-preservation. It was a predictable move, a final, pathetic end to a once unbreakable friendship. Max knew this because he had carefully orchestrated it. He had leaked just enough information to each of them to make them turn on each other. The seeds of doubt he had planted were now blooming into a garden of distrust and hatred.
But he wasn't done yet. This was not enough. He didn't want them to just be disgraced. He wanted them to feel the same cold, hollow emptiness he had felt. He wanted them to lose everything, just as he had. He had a final piece of information, a final nail in the coffin. It was the original Nexus business plan, a document they had signed in the very beginning. A document that detailed a clear, unmistakable plan to deceive investors and sell the company for a quick profit, all while hiding behind a facade of visionary leadership. It was the proof of their conspiracy, the proof of their betrayal. It was the beginning of their end. He sat in the dark, the glow of his screen illuminating his face, and began to write. He wasn't writing a blog post or a news leak. He was writing an open letter to the public, to the media, to the world. He was going to expose them, not just for what they did to him, but for what they had done to so many others. He was going to use his own app, his own creation, to deliver his final, most devastating message. He was going to use the Nexus app to tell the world the story of how it was built, how it was stolen, and how its founders had betrayed everyone who had ever believed in them. The open letter was a digital tidal wave. It was an instant sensation, spreading across the internet like wildfire. The letter, signed Aether, detailed every single lie, every single manipulation, every single act of betrayal. It was a story told with a cold, hard, unvarnished truth, a story that couldn't be denied. The public, once so in love with Nexus, was now filled with a righteous, furious anger. The company, once an empire, was now a hollow shell.
Chloe and Liam were destroyed. Their families disowned them. Their friends abandoned them. They lost everything: their homes, their cars, their money, their dignity. They were no longer the visionary leaders of a tech empire. They were the villains of the world's most dramatic corporate scandal. They were the punchline to a very cruel joke. They were left with nothing. Max watched from his server room, his heart a cold, hard stone in his chest. He felt no triumph, no joy, no sense of satisfaction. He felt nothing. The revenge, the long, grueling quest, had not filled the void. It had only made it bigger. He had lost his friends, his life, his passion. The revenge had cost him everything. One day, an anonymous, encrypted message came to him through Aether. It was from the graphic designer, the one he had first contacted. "Thank you," it read. You gave us our lives back. You gave us our dignity. A few days later, another message came, this one from the marketing analyst. You're a hero, it said. You're the man who fought back.
Max sat in silence, reading the messages. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man who had lost everything. But then he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of hope. He realized that in his quest for revenge, he had built something more powerful than any app. He had built a community. He had built a network of people who had been wronged, people who had been left behind. He had built something real, something honest. He didn't want to live in the shadows anymore. He came out of the server room, his face illuminated not by the cold glow of a computer screen, but by the warmth of the sun. He sold the server and gave the money to his community of informants, a fund to help them get back on their feet. He started a new project, a new app. It was not a social network. It was a non-profit, a platform to help other victims of corporate greed. It was a way to help others, a way to make a difference. He was no longer a ghost. He was a beacon. He was still a genius, a man who saw the world in code, but now he was also a man who saw the world in people. He had lost everything, but he had found something far more valuable, a purpose. He had found a new life, a new beginning, a new dawn. He had avenged himself, but in doing so, he had become something more. He had become a hero, not for revenge, but for the truth. Dear viewers of the Story by Peter Hub, this is the 20th anniversary issue. The channel is very fresh in this regard. I'll remind you once again, write in the comments, where are you watching from? I will be very interested to see from which part of the planet you are watching this video. See you soon, my dear subscribers.